The morning mist crept low across Evergreen Valley, weaving between rows of cornstalks as Nathan Miller surveyed his farm from the weathered front porch of his homestead. The chill autumn air made his old shoulder wound ache, a constant reminder of a past life he'd tried hard to leave behind. His calloused hands, now more accustomed to holding farming tools than firearms, gripped the porch railing as he watched a group of riders approaching through the dawn haze. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. At 45, Nathan Miller had spent the last 7 years building something honest in Evergreen Valley, Montana. His 100 acres of fertile soil, nestled between the towering Black Rock Mountains and the meandering Silver River, represented more than just a farm. It was his redemption. The land had been cheap, too close to Indian territory for most settlers' comfort, but Nathan had seen its potential. More importantly, he'd seen a chance to bury his past under seasons of wheat and corn. His keen eyes, still sharp despite years of peaceful farming, noted details about the approaching riders that sent familiar warnings through his mind. 5. Men, moving with the lazy confidence of those who were used to taking what they wanted. Their horses were well maintained, but showed signs of hard travel, and the way they carried themselves spoke of experience with violence. "Sarah," he called quietly through the open door to his wife, who was preparing breakfast. "Get Benjamin from the barn, and both of you stay inside." Sarah Miller had been a schoolteacher in the nearby town of Millbrook when they met. She'd seen past his rough edges to the man he was trying to become, though she'd never pressed him about the shadows in his past. "Pa!" 14-year-old Benjamin appeared at the barn door, questions in his eyes. The boy had his mother's gentle nature, but had inherited Nathan's sharp instincts. "Those men don't look like regular travelers." "No, son, they don't. Do as your mother says." Nathan kept his voice steady, though his mind was already calculating distances, angles, and possibilities he'd hoped never to need again. The riders pulled up about 30 yards from the house, spreading out in a way that raised more red flags. In Nathan's mind, their leader, a broad-shouldered man with a distinctive black hat and silver-trimmed vest, guided his horse a few steps forward. "Morning, friend," the man called out, his tone carefully pleasant. "Name's Jackson Wade. My associates and I represent certain business interests in Helena. Hoping we might have a word about your property." Nathan recognized the name, though he kept his face neutral. Jackson Wade had been making a name for himself in the territory, buying up or forcing out smaller farmers and ranchers, consolidating land for wealthy Eastern investors. There were rumors about those who refused to sell, stories about mysterious accidents and convenient fires. "Mr. Wade," Nathan acknowledged, remaining on his porch, "my land isn't for sale, if that's what you're here about." Wade's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened slightly. "Now that's not very neighborly. Way I hear it, this soil's barely producing. Wouldn't even classify as marginal land by most standards. Yet here you are, stubbornly hanging on. Makes a man wonder why." The implied threat wasn't subtle, but it wasn't what made Nathan's pulse quicken. It was the way Wade's men were subtly shifting positions and how the leader's right hand rested casually near his holster. These weren't just business representatives. They were experienced gunmen trying to look like legitimate businessmen. "My land, my business," Nathan replied evenly, "and it's producing just fine." Wade's smile faded slightly. "See, that's where you're wrong, Miller. Everything in this valley is our business now. We've acquired most of the water rights upstream. Come spring, this land's going to be mighty thirsty. Might not be worth much by then." Nathan felt a cold anger he hadn't experienced in years, not at the threat itself, but at the familiar pattern. Men like Wade, using money and force to take what wasn't theirs, crushing smaller folks under the wheels of progress. It was why he'd walked away from his old life, hoping to find something cleaner, more honest. That sounds like a threat, Mr. Wade. Just stating facts. We're offering fair prices now. Might not be so generous later. Wade paused, studying Nathan with narrowed eyes. You know, something's been bothering me since we started looking into this area. Nathan Miller. Simple. Farmer. Bought this land 7 years ago, cash deal. Before that, nothing. Like you didn't exist. Nathan kept his expression neutral, though inwardly he cursed. He'd been careful about his background, but men like Wade had connections, ways of discovering inconvenient truths. Lot of folks came. West looking for fresh starts, Nathan said carefully. Nothing unusual about that. Wade's smile turned predatory. True enough, but most folks leave some kind of trail. School records, military service, family connections. You're a ghost, and that makes me mighty curious. The tension ratcheted up several notches. Wade's men had spread out further, trying to look casual, but actually establishing clear fields of fire. Nathan noticed everything, the way they balanced in their saddles, the well-worn holsters, the careful distances they maintained. These weren't common thugs. They were professionals. Curiosity can be dangerous, Mr. Wade. Nathan said softly, his voice carrying an edge that made Wade's smile falter slightly. Sometimes a man's past is best left alone. We'll be back, Wade announced, gathering his reins. Think hard about our offer. Hate to see anything unfortunate happen to such a nice family farm. As the riders departed, Nathan remained on his porch, his mind racing with implications and possibilities. He'd worked hard to build this life, to become someone his wife and a son could be proud of. But Wade's appearance threatened everything, not just his land, but the careful walls he'd built between his present and his past. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her face concerned. Nathan? What did they want? The land, he replied simply, though his eyes never left the departing riders. They're buying up the valley, or taking it, for those who won't sell. There's something else, she said quietly. She'd always been able to read him better than anyone. The way you were standing, how you watched them, I haven't seen you like that since. She trailed off, leaving unspoken the few glimpses she'd had of his other side, the man he'd been before. Nathan finally turned to her, seeing the worry in her eyes. Wade's not just some land speculator. He's connected to some powerful people, and he's used to getting his way. And he's asking questions about my past. Benjamin joined them on the porch, his young face serious. What are we going to do, Pa? Nathan looked out over his fields, the land he'd poured 7 years of honest sweat into. He'd chosen this valley partly because it was remote, partly because the soil was good, but mostly because it lay along an old trail he knew well. A trail that led to places and people he'd hoped never to see again. We're going to protect what's ours, he said finally, but first I need to take a ride. There's some old friends I need to talk to. He saw the flash of understanding in Sarah's eyes. She knew he meant people from his past life. The kind of friends you left behind, she asked softly. The kind who knows how to handle men like Wade, Nathan confirmed. I'd tried to walk away from that life, Sarah. Tried to be the man you and Benjamin deserve. But sometimes the past is the only thing that can protect the future. As the sun climbed higher over Evergreen Valley, Nathan Miller began making preparations for a journey he'd hoped never to take. In the barn, behind a false wall he'd built years ago, lay a wooden chest containing remnants of another life. Maps, letters, and a pair of custom-made Colt revolvers he'd promised himself he'd never wear again. But promises, like the peaceful life he'd built, sometimes had to bend before they broke completely. Wade and his men would be back, and when they came, they'd find more than just a simple farmer protecting his land. They'd discover why some ghosts are best left undisturbed. Nathan opened the wooden chest slowly, dust motes dancing in the barns. Filtered light. Inside, wrapped in well-oiled cloth, lay the twin Colts. Not just weapons, but symbols of a life he'd walked away from. Beside them rested a folded piece of leather, cracked with age but still supple. He unfolded it carefully, revealing a detailed map of the territory with markings and notations only he could understand. "I remember the first time I saw those." Sarah's voice came quietly from the barn door. She'd never pressed him about the guns, about what they meant, but she wasn't naive. "It was 2 weeks after we married. You thought I was asleep when you checked on them." Nathan ran his fingers over the familiar grip of one revolver. "These belonged to my mentor, James Hawkins. He left them to me when things changed." "The name they used to whisper in saloons?" Sarah asked, moving closer. "The one you never say?" Nathan nodded slowly. Before he was Nathan Miller, honest farmer and family man, he'd been someone else, a name that still carried weight in certain circles, though few knew the face that went with it. "Ghost River Jack," he said softly, the first time he'd spoken that name in 7 years. "The outlaw who never killed unless he had to," Sarah finished. "The one who targeted corrupt railroad men and land barons, but left poor folks alone." She smiled slightly at his surprised look. "I grew up in these territories, Nathan. I heard the stories, just never thought I'd marry the man from them." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Benjamin appeared in the doorway, his young face a mix of confusion and growing understanding. "Pa, were you really—" "I was someone else once, son," Nathan admitted, facing the boy squarely. "Someone who tried to fight injustice, but sometimes lost his way doing it. That's why I left it behind, wanted to build something honest, something real." He began gathering specific items from the chest: the map, a small journal with names and locations, and a brass pocket watch that doubled as a compass. "Wade's men will be watching the main roads," he explained to his family, "but there's older paths through these mountains, ways that only certain people remember." "The outlaw's trails," Benjamin said, his voice caught between awe and uncertainty. "The ghost paths," Nathan corrected, "named that because so few knew about them. Your mother's right. I never killed unless there was no choice. But I did help people escape, families being pushed off their land, honest folks caught between powerful interests. The paths helped them disappear, start fresh somewhere else." Sarah watched him check the revolver's actions with practiced ease, his fingers remembering what his mind had tried to forget. "These friends you're going to see, they're from the Ghost Paths days?" Nathan nodded. 3 days' ride north, if the old trails are still open. Man named Marcus Reeves. He was part of my group. Retired now, runs a small trading post. But he keeps his ears open, knows things about men like Wade." "And he'll help?" Benjamin asked. "Marcus owes me his life," Nathan said simply. "More importantly, he hates men who steal land through paper and promises as much as those who take it by force." He looked at his son seriously. "While I'm gone, you need to be the man of the house. Watch the approaches I showed you, the way the valley funnels visitors past certain points. If Wade's men come back, we'll see them first," Benjamin assured him, standing straighter. Nathan turned to Sarah, seeing the worry in her eyes, but also the steel beneath it. This was a woman who'd chosen to marry him, even knowing there were shadows in his past. "Marcus isn't the only one I need to see," he admitted. "There's a circuit judge in Helena, James Monroe. He was sympathetic to our cause back then, helped us expose corrupt land deals legally when we could. You're not just gathering old friends," Sarah realized. "You're building a defense on multiple fronts." Nathan smiled slightly. His wife's intelligence had always been one of her most attractive qualities. Wade's too smart to be fought just one way. He's got money, connections, and gun hands. We'll need help on all those levels. He began preparing his gear. Not the simple supplies of a farmer's journey, but the carefully chosen items of someone who knew about moving unseen through dangerous territory. "I'll take the North Trail up through Shadow Canyon," he explained. "It adds a day to the journey, but keeps me off the main roads where Wade's men will be watching." Sarah nodded, then went to the house. She returned with a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Provisions," she said, "and I added your old medicine kit, the one you think I don't know about under the floorboards." Nathan's eyebrows rose. The kit contained herbs and treatments he'd learned from an old Chinese doctor during his outlaw days, remedies that worked better than anything modern medicine offered. "You never miss much, do you?" "I married Ghost River Jack," she said softly. "Even if that's not who you are anymore, I always knew that man was still in there. The one who protected people, who fought against men who used power to hurt others." Nathan finished his preparations as the sun climbed toward noon. He'd changed into darker clothes, better suited for moving unseen, and strapped on the gun belt, with the familiar weight that brought back memories both good and bad. 3 days to Marcus," he told Sarah. "Maybe 2 more to reach the judge, if Wade's men come while I'm gone." "We know the escape routes you showed us," she assured him. "The hidden cave in the north pasture, the tunnel under the root cellar. We'll be ready." Nathan mounted his horse, feeling the years fall away as he settled into the saddle. He wasn't just riding to find help. He was crossing a line he'd drawn 7 years ago, stepping back into a world he'd tried to leave behind. "Pa," Benjamin called as Nathan turned his horse toward the trail. "Be careful." Nathan looked back at his family, the life he'd built, the peace he'd found. Wade and his kind threatened all of it. But they'd soon learn what others had discovered years ago. Sometimes the most dangerous man isn't the one who seeks violence, but the one who's walked away from it and knows exactly what it costs to return. As he rode toward Shadow Canyon, Nathan Miller felt Ghost River Jack stirring in his blood. Not with the wild fury of youth, but with the cold calculation of experience. Wade thought he was pressuring a simple farmer. Instead, he'd awakened something that should have been left sleeping, and the ghost paths were about to become active. Once again, thunder rolled across Shadow Canyon as Nathan guided his horse along paths few remembered. The afternoon sky had darkened with approaching storm clouds, but he pressed on, knowing each hour mattered. The trail narrowed between weathered rock faces, eventually opening into a sheltered valley that looked untouched by time. Marcus Reeves's trading post stood much as Nathan remembered it. A sturdy log structure nestled against the canyon wall, smoke curling from its stone chimney. But something was different. Nathan's instincts, sharp as ever, caught subtle signs of recent activity. Fresh horse tracks, trampled grass near the hitching post, and most tellingly, 2 men watching from concealed positions near the building. "Still move like a ghost, Jack," a familiar voice called out. Marcus Reeves emerged from the shadows of his porch, 7 years older, but still carrying himself with the same quiet strength. His graying hair and beard couldn't hide the intelligence in his eyes as he studied his old friend. "Though I hear you're going by Nathan Miller these days, Marcus." Nathan dismounted, noting how his old companion's right hand stayed near his holster, not threatening, just careful. "Looks like you were expecting company." "Word travels, even up here." Marcus gestured toward the cabin. "Wade's boys paid me a visit yesterday, asking questions about local history, property records. Seemed especially interested in certain trails that don't show up on regular maps." Inside the trading post, Nathan found it unchanged. Shelves stocked with basic supplies, walls decorated with maps and old wanted posters. A pot of coffee bubbled on the wood stove, its aroma mixing with the smell of leather and tobacco. "Your timing's interesting," Marcus continued, pouring 2 cups of coffee. "Just got a letter from Judge Monroe. Seems Wade's operation is bigger than we thought. He's not just buying land, he's erasing history." "Erasing history?" Marcus pulled out a worn leather folder. "Remember the Ghost River Company? The legitimate business we set up to help protect smaller landowners?" Nathan nodded. "It had been one of their more innovative operations, a legal entity that helped farmers and ranchers protect their water rights from corrupt business interests. Wade's people have been systematically destroying records of those old land deals, Marcus explained. County offices mysteriously catching fire, deed books disappearing. They're not just taking land, they're erasing any legal proof of who really owns what. That's why they're pushing so hard on my place, Nathan realized. The water rights we secured back then? Your farm sits on a crucial watershed. Those rights you're holding? They're part of a bigger pattern we created, a legal framework that's been protecting small farmers for years. Marcus spread out an old map, pointing to key locations. Each piece of land we helped secure was chosen strategically. Together, they form a barrier against the kind of large-scale water theft Wade's planning. Nathan studied the map, memories flooding back. Each marked location represented more than just property. They were pieces of a careful plan to protect the territory's water resources from exploitation. There's more, Marcus said quietly, pulling out a sealed letter. This arrived last week from Clara Hawkins. Nathan's head snapped up. James Hawkins's widow? I haven't heard from her since the night he died, Marcus finished. She's been watching Jack all these years, keeping track of how the system we built has been protecting people. Now, she's warning us. Wade isn't working alone. He's backed by the same mining interests that James died trying to expose. The revelation hit Nathan hard. James Hawkins had been more than his mentor. He'd been the architect of their entire operation. His death had been what finally pushed Nathan to leave that life behind. Clara sent this too. Marcus unwrapped a package, revealing a leather-bound journal. James's personal records, everything he learned about the mining companies, their methods, their weak points. He wanted you to have it, but you disappeared before Clara could find you. Nathan opened the journal carefully. Inside, written in his mentor's precise hand, was a detailed account of corruption and power plays that stretched back decades. More importantly, it contained strategies for fighting back, legal precedents, business connections, and methods for exposing corporate wrongdoing. James knew someday they'd try again, Marcus explained. That's why he set everything up the way he did. The Ghost River Company, the water rights network, even the trails we used, it was all part of a bigger plan. He was building something that could last, something that could protect people even after we were gone. And Wade's people figured it out, Nathan said grimly. They're not just after land. They're trying to dismantle everything we built. Not just dismantle it, they want to use it. Take control of the water rights network we created and turn it against the very people it was meant to protect. Marcus poured more coffee. That's why Clara reached out now. She's been watching Wade's operation spread across 3 territories. They're following the same patterns we used to fight against. Nathan absorbed this information, his tactical mind already seeing implications. The judge's letter. What did Monroe say? He's been tracking legal cases across the territory, land disputes, water rights challenges. He's seeing our old enemies resurface, wearing new faces, but using the same methods. And he's not the only one watching. Marcus pulled out several newspapers from different cities. Notice anything about these stories? Nathan scanned the articles, reports of small farmers being forced out, mysterious accidents, corporate land grabs disguised as progress. They're targeting all the key points we used to protect, every piece of land that helps control water flow through the territory. Exactly. Wade's just one piece of a bigger operation. They're trying to control everything from the mountain watersheds to the valley irrigation systems. Marcus leaned forward. But here's what they don't know, Jack. We weren't just protecting land back then. We were building a network, people, places, resources, all connected in ways that don't show up on any official document. The ghost paths were more than just trails, Nathan remembered. They were connections. Ways for people to help each other when the law couldn't or wouldn't, and they're still out there, older now like us, but remembering. Clara's been keeping track. Every ranch we helped save, every farmer we protected, their children grew up on stories about Ghost River Jack and his people. They've been watching Wade's operations spread, waiting for a sign. Nathan stood, moving to the window. The storm had passed, leaving the air clean and sharp. I left that life behind, Marcus. Built something real, something honest. Did you? Or did you just find a different way to protect people? Marcus joined him at the window. That farm of yours, you didn't choose that location by accident. You've been guarding one of the most important water sources in the territory, whether you admitted it to yourself or not. The truth of those words hit home. Even in trying to escape his past, Nathan had followed patterns laid down years ago. His instincts, shaped by James Hawkins's teachings, had led him to a place where he could continue their work, even if he hadn't realized it. Wade's men will be watching the usual routes, Marcus said, reading his friend's thoughts. But the old paths are still open. I've kept them maintained, just like Clara asked, and there are others, Jack, people we helped, people who remember. They've been waiting for Ghost River Jack to ride again. Nathan touched the worn leather of James's journal. I'm not that man anymore, Marcus. Can't go back to operating outside the law. Maybe you don't have to. Marcus smiled slightly. James always said the best way to fight corruption was to use every tool available, legal and otherwise. That's why he created the Ghost River Company, why he worked with Judge Monroe. He knew someday we'd need both shadow and light to protect. What matters? As evening approached, Nathan prepared to ride out. He had the journal secured in his saddlebags, along with maps showing the current state of Wade's operations. But he also carried something else now, understanding. The life he'd built wasn't an escape from his past, it was a continuation of it in a different form. Clara's gathered quite a bit of evidence against Wade's backers, Marcus said as Nathan mounted up. Proof of their methods, their connections to the old mining interests, combined with what's in James's journal. Well, let's just say Judge Monroe's been waiting for something like this. It's not just about my farm anymore, is it? Nathan asked, though he already knew the answer. It never was, Jack. Wade didn't choose your land by accident. They've been hunting down every piece of the network we built, trying to unpick James's work thread by thread. Your place, it's not just about water rights. It's one of the keystones of everything we created. As Nathan rode out, following trails that existed on no official map, he felt the weight of James Hawkins' journal against his side. His mentor had seen further than any of them, building defenses that could last generations. Now those defenses were needed again, and Ghost River Jack had a new mission, not just protecting his own land, but preserving a legacy bigger than himself. The sun set behind the mountains as Nathan pushed on through gathering darkness. He had more stops to make, more old friends to contact. But now he moved with renewed purpose, understanding that sometimes the past doesn't need to be buried. It just needs to be transformed into something that can serve the present. The night deepened as Nathan navigated through forgotten valleys, each landmark triggering memories of operations from years past. A distinctive rock formation, locally known as Eagle's Rest, marked a turn in the trail that few would notice. Beyond it lay a network of paths that had once served as escape routes for families fleeing corporate persecution. "Should have known I'd find you here," a voice called from the shadows. Nathan's hand moved instinctively to his revolver before recognizing the speaker. Daniel Webb emerged from a concealed position, his dark clothes blending perfectly with the night. The former scout had aged well, his Native American heritage evident in his high cheekbones and sharp eyes. "Been watching since you left Marcus's place," Daniel explained, falling in alongside Nathan's horse. "Wade's men are crawling all over the main roads. Had to redirect 3 of them away from the old trails just yesterday. You've been patrolling? Nathan asked, surprised to find another piece of their old network still active. Someone had to, Daniel replied, leading them toward a hidden campsite. After you left, Clara asked some of us to keep an eye on things, make sure the path stayed open for folks who might need them. The campsite was perfectly positioned, invisible from any distance, but offering clear views of the surrounding territory. A small fire burned low, and the aroma of coffee mixed with the crisp mountain air. James predicted this, Daniel continued, pouring coffee into tin cups. Said the corporations would get smarter, start using paper and politics instead of just force. That's why he spent so much time setting up legal protections, working with Judge Monroe to create precedents that could shield small landowners. Seems like everyone knew more about our old operation's importance than I did, Nathan admitted, accepting the coffee. Daniel's laugh was quiet but genuine. You were always the best at the immediate problems, protecting people, fighting back when needed. James knew that. He also knew you'd need time away, time to find a different way of doing things. That's why he made sure your disappearance was complete, all traces erased. A sound in the darkness brought both men to alert stillness. But it was only a deer moving through the underbrush. Still, Nathan noticed how quickly they'd both reverted to old habits, constantly aware, reading the night's rhythms. Wade's not the only one gathering forces, Daniel said after a while. Word's been spreading through the old network. Clara's been coordinating with Judge Monroe, building a case against the mining companies. And there are others, Jack. People we helped years ago, who've grown into positions of influence. He pulled out a small notebook, its pages filled with names and locations. Thomas Richardson. Remember that farmer we helped escape when the railroad was trying to steal his land? His son's a newspaper editor now in Helena. Mary Cooper, the widow who stood up to those cattle barons. Her daughter's married to a state legislator. The seeds we planted, they grew into something bigger. Nathan studied the notebook, recognizing names and connecting them to faces from the past. Each entry represented not just an individual, but a potential ally in the coming fight. James's journal, he said thoughtfully. It's not just about exposing a corruption, is it? He was mapping connections, building a foundation for something larger. Daniel nodded. A way to fight injustice that didn't depend solely on outlaws and hidden trails. Don't get me wrong, sometimes you need men willing to stand up with guns. But James saw further. He understood that lasting change needs both shadow and light. The scout pulled out another document, this one a detailed map of corporate landholdings across the territory. See these patterns? The mining companies aren't just buying land randomly. They're following the same waterways we used to protect. Every piece of property they're targeting was part of James's original network. They're not just after resources, Nathan realized. They're trying to dismantle the legal framework we created, the protections we put in place for small farmers. Exactly. But here's what they don't understand. The real network isn't on any map. It's in the people we helped, the connections we built. Every family that kept their land because of us, every community that survived corporate pressure, they remember. They've been waiting for a sign that the ghost paths are open again. Daniel's words carried weight in the mountain night. Nathan had thought he was alone in walking away from their old life, but he was beginning to understand that others had simply found different ways to continue the work. That boy of yours, Daniel said suddenly. Benjamin, he has his mother's gentle nature, but I've seen him track game through the north pasture. Got your instincts. Nathan's surprise must have shown on his face, because Daniel smiled. Did you think Clara was the only one keeping watch? We've been guarding the network all these years, making sure it would be there when needed. Your farm isn't just strategically located, it's a symbol. Ghost River Jack turning honest work into another way of protecting people. The dawn was approaching as they broke camp. Daniel would continue his patrol of the old trails, while Nathan had another stop to make before reaching Judge Monroe. Head east through Thunder Basin, Daniel advised. Rachel Carter's still running that station we used to use. She's been gathering information about Wade's operation, things that might interest the judge. As Nathan rode out, he felt the pieces of a larger pattern coming together. His years of farming hadn't been an escape from his past. They'd been a continuation of it, in a different form. The quiet life he'd built was part of something bigger, a network of protection and resistance that had never truly disappeared. Ghost River Jack hadn't vanished 7 years ago. He'd just found a new way to fight, a new way to protect. And now, as Wade's operation threatened everything they'd built, it was time to remind the territory that some legends don't die. They evolve, adapting to serve justice in whatever form necessary. The sun rose over the mountains as Nathan pushed on, James Hawkins' journal resting against his heart like a promise kept. Ahead lay more revelations, more pieces of a legacy he'd only begun to understand. Behind him, Daniel Webb melted into the landscape, one more guardian of paths that existed on no official map, but lived in the memory of those who still believed in justice. Thunder Basin came into view as early morning light painted the cliffs. In shades of amber, Rachel Carter's way station stood where 3 valleys converged, disguised as a simple rest stop for travelers. Nathan noted changes since his last visit: additional outbuildings, a new corral, and subtle defensive improvements that most would overlook. A woman with steel-grey hair tied back in a practical braid stepped onto the station's porch, a Spencer, carbine held casually in her weathered hands. "Well, if it isn't the farmer himself," Rachel called out, though her rifle remained ready. "Show me the signs, stranger, so I know you still remember." Nathan drew his horse to a halt at the prescribed distance, then made a series of subtle hand gestures, the old recognition code they'd used on the ghost paths. Rachel's stern expression softened into a smile. "Still move your fingers like James taught you," she observed, lowering her rifle. "Good to see some things don't fade." Inside the station, Nathan found the main room transformed into what appeared to be a regular trading post, but he recognized the careful organization of items, how certain crates and barrels were positioned to provide cover if needed. "Wade's men were through here 2 days ago," Rachel reported, pouring coffee from a battered pot. "Getting bolder. Actually, I tried to search my storage rooms." "Tried?" Her smile turned predatory. "Amazing how quickly city men retreat when they find themselves facing a dozen rifles held by angry women who know how to use them." She gestured toward a door where Nathan glimpsed several young women going about their business. "My girls, been training them in more than just running a way station." The next generation, Nathan realized. Someone has to carry on. Rachel confirmed, "But that's not why you're here. You've seen Marcus and Daniel, which means you know about James's journal. What you don't know is what we found in Wade's saddlebags when his men got careless." She produced a leather portfolio, its contents spilling across the table. Corporate documents, telegrams, and most importantly, a detailed map of planned operations across the territory. "Look familiar?" Rachel asked, pointing to specific markings. "They're using our old supply routes. Someone gave them information about the ghost paths, but they don't understand what they're really seeing." Nathan studied the documents, his tactical mind absorbing details. "They think they're just convenient trails." "Exactly. They don't realize each path was chosen for more than just moving unseen. James selected routes that connected key water sources, defensible positions, and communities that could support each other. He wasn't just building escape routes, he was creating a network of mutual protection." A commotion outside drew their attention. Through the window, Nathan saw a family arriving in a loaded wagon, a father, mother, and 3 children, their possessions hastily packed. "The Hendersons," Rachel explained. "Wade's men burned their farm yesterday. Claimed it was an accident, but we know better. They're targeting anyone connected to the old water rights network. Nathan watched as Rachel's girls efficiently helped the family, moving them to one of the outbuildings he now realized served as temporary shelter for displaced people. It was a scene he'd witnessed many times in his Ghost River Jack days. But with a crucial difference. You're not just helping them escape, he observed. You're organizing them. Rachel nodded approvingly. James always said the best defense against corruption is community. Every family that comes through here, we connect them with others who've faced similar pressure. They share information, resources, and support. Wade thinks he's breaking people's spirits. Instead, he's building an army of witnesses. She pulled out another document, this one a ledger filled with careful notes. Every incident, every threat, every illegal action, all documented. Judge Monroe's been collecting similar evidence across 3 territories. But there's something else you need to see. Rachel led Nathan to a back room, where an unusual sight greeted him. A young woman sat at a desk equipped with a telegraph key, but it was unlike any setup he'd seen before. Multiple lines ran into a complex switching system. "Meet Elizabeth, my daughter," Rachel introduced. "She's modified our old communication methods. Show him, Lizzie." Elizabeth demonstrated how she could redirect telegraph messages between different lines, intercepting and monitoring communications across the territory. "Wade's people rely heavily on telegrams," she explained. "They think they're being clever using codes, but once you understand their patterns..." Nathan watched as she quickly decoded an intercepted message. "They're planning to move against 3 more farms next week," she reported, "all located along critical water routes. We've been tracking their operations for months," Rachel added. "At first, we thought they were just aggressive businessmen. Then we noticed they were specifically targeting lands that James helped protect years ago. They're not just stealing property, they're systematically dismantling everything we built." Nathan's mind raced with implications. The legal framework James created, the water rights network. They're not just trying to control resources. They want to erase any proof that small farmers ever had legal protection, Rachel finished. "That's why they're burning county offices, destroying records. If they can eliminate the documentation James created, they can rewrite the territory's water rights however they want." A quiet knock interrupted them. One of Rachel's girls entered with fresh intelligence. Wade's men had been spotted moving equipment towards Silver Creek, one of the major water sources in the region. "They're moving faster than expected," Rachel mused. "Tell me, Nathan, does your farm still have that old root cellar? The one with the hidden room?" Nathan nodded slowly, memories stirring. "Haven't opened it in years, but might want to check it when you get back." "James stored something there just before, said it was insurance in case the mining companies ever returned." "What kind of insurance?" "The kind that could destroy them if used properly. Corporate documents, proof of their methods from 30 years ago. James didn't just build legal protections, he gathered evidence of everything they did. Kept it scattered across the territory in places only Ghost River Jack could find." Nathan's tactical mind began working in familiar patterns. Each safe house, each way station, all part of a larger plan, Rachel confirmed. "The ghost paths aren't just trails, they're a map leading to everything we need to fight back. Wade's people found some of our old routes, but they don't understand what they're really looking at. Each location James chose serves multiple purposes." She spread out a new map, this one marked with symbols Nathan had never seen. "Your farm, for instance. The water rights are important, yes, but it's also positioned to monitor movement through the valley. And that root cellar? It's part of a larger tunnel system that connects to 3 other properties. Properties that James helped protect," Nathan realized, "all strategically located. To support each other in times of trouble," Rachel finished. "Wade thinks he's fighting individual farmers. He doesn't realize he's up against a network that's been preparing for this fight for 30 years. As morning turned to afternoon, Nathan absorbed more details of the operation Rachel had maintained. The way station wasn't just a safe house. It was a coordination center, gathering intelligence and organizing resistance across the territory. James knew this day would come, Rachel said as Nathan prepared to leave. That's why he trained us all differently. Marcus with strategy, Daniel with the trails, me with organizing people, and you, Nathan, he taught you everything because he knew someday we'd need someone who could bring it all together. I left that life behind, Nathan reminded her. Did you? Or did you just find a different way to fight? That farm of yours, the way you've organized the local families, how you've taught them to watch for trouble, sounds a lot like what we used to do, just more settled. She handed him a package. Signal flares made special. Burn with colors Wade's men won't recognize. When the time comes, use them. The families around here, they remember Ghost River Jack. They've been waiting for a sign that the old ways are still alive. As Nathan rode out, following trails that held more meaning than he'd realized, he felt his old instincts sharpening. The skills James had taught him hadn't faded. They'd just been redirected into building something honest, something strong. The sun climbed higher as he pushed on toward Judge Monroe's, but his mind was already working on plans. Wade thought he was fighting isolated farmers, but he was about to learn that some networks run deeper than paper and money could ever reach. The afternoon light cast long shadows through the pines as Nathan considered Rachel's revelations. Near a distinctive rock formation, he dismounted to check his horse's shoes, but his real purpose was surveying the landscape with fresh eyes. What he'd once seen as natural features now revealed their strategic significance. A young rider approached. From the east, moving with the casual confidence that marked Rachel's trained scouts. "Mr. Miller," she called out, using his farmer's name but making a subtle hand gesture from the old code. "Name's Catherine. Miss Rachel sent me to show you something before you head to the judges." Catherine led him off the main trail to what appeared to be a typical prospector's claim, abandoned years ago. But as they drew closer, Nathan noticed telltale signs that would be invisible to untrained eyes. Marks on trees, patterns in the scattered rocks. "Been maintaining this place since I was 12, Catherine explained, dismounting near the mine's entrance. "Most folks see an empty claim. We see—" She pressed a hidden mechanism, and a section of seemingly solid rock face swung inward. Inside, Nathan found a sophisticated operation. Maps lined the walls, each marked with current corporate holdings and planned acquisitions. A telegraph key sat in one corner, connected to lines that ran through carefully concealed conduits. "We have 15 stations like this between here and Helena," Catherine explained, lighting a lantern. "Each monitoring different aspects of Wade's operation. This one focuses on tracking their equipment movements, those steam pumps they're bringing. They're not just for moving water." She pointed to detailed drawings of the machinery. "These are mining pumps, modified for something else. See these attachments? They're designed to inject chemicals into water sources. Wade's people aren't just trying to control the water, they're planning to poison any sources they can't directly control." Nathan examined the technical drawings, his mind making connections. Force people to rely on their controlled water sources. Exactly. But that's not why Miss Rachel sent me. Catherine moved to a locked cabinet, producing a key that hung around her neck. "This belonged to your mentor. Miss Rachel said it's time you had it." Inside the cabinet, Nathan found something unexpected. A surveyor's transit, but unlike any he'd seen before. The brass instrument was custom-made, with additional lenses and markings that served no obvious purpose. "James used this to map the ghost paths," Catherine explained. "But it does more than just measure distances. Those extra lenses, they're calibrated to track water flow patterns underground. He used it to map aquifers and hidden springs across the territory. Nathan lifted the instrument carefully, memories stirring of watching James work with it years ago. I never understood half of what he was measuring, because he was mapping more than just trails. Each ghost path follows underground water sources. When Wade's men found some of our old routes, they thought they were just convenient paths through rough country. They don't realize they're actually following a map of the territory's entire water system. She produced a set of James's original surveys, carefully preserved. Compare these to Wade's planning documents. See the pattern? They're trying to control surface water rights, but James mapped everything: surface and underground sources, seasonal flows, natural reservoirs. Every piece of land he helped protect sits at a crucial point in the larger water system. Nathan's tactical mind absorbed the implications. My farm sits above a major underground confluence. 3 aquifers meet beneath your property. That's the real reason Wade wants it so badly. His geological surveys must have shown traces of the water, but he doesn't understand the full picture. Catherine rolled out a larger map on a rough table. These are all the properties Wade's targeted in the past month. Now look at James's original surveys. Every single one sits at a crucial point in the territory's water system. They think they're just consolidating surface rights, but they're actually following a map they don't understand. Nathan finished, seeing the pattern clearly now. James wasn't just protecting individual farms. He was creating a network of properties that could control the entire region's water supply. Not control, protect, Catherine corrected. Each piece of land he helped save was chosen to prevent any single group from monopolizing the water. The legal framework he created, the water rights he helped secure, it all works together. If any one piece falls, there are others to maintain the balance. She pointed to specific locations. These families, Wade's pressuring Wade, they don't realize it, but their properties form a natural defense network. If his men try to dam or divert water in one place, the underground sources James mapped can be used to counter it. Nathan studied the maps with growing understanding. Every skill James had taught him, reading terrain, planning operations, coordinating people, it had all been preparation for something larger. Miss Rachel says you've been teaching your boys similar skills, Catherine mentioned casually. Maybe not the same way you learned them, but tracking game, reading weather, signs, noticing details others miss. Nathan thought of Benjamin's natural ability to spot approaching riders before anyone else, how he seemed to know instinctively which parts of their land needed watching. He doesn't know what he's really learning, just like we didn't when we were young, Catherine smiled. Miss Rachel started teaching me about the stations by having me play treasure hunt games. James always said the best skills are learned naturally, becoming part of who you are. The sound of distant hooves brought them both to alert stillness. Catherine quickly checked through a cleverly concealed viewing port. Wade's men, she whispered. 2 of them following the main trail. Nathan watched through another port as the riders passed below their position. The men were scanning the landscape carefully, but their attention was focused on obvious features. They rode right past the signs that would have led them to the hidden station. They're looking harder. Now, Catherine observed after the riders moved on. But they still don't know what they're really seeing. That's why Miss Rachel wanted you to have James's transit. You'll need it when the time comes. For what? To show others what to look for. Wade's not just fighting us here, he's trying to expand into other territories. We've been getting requests for help from folks facing similar pressure. They need to learn what James taught us about reading the land, understanding its secrets. As they prepared to leave the station, Catherine handed Nathan one final item, a small notebook filled with James's handwritten codes. The transit will help you map the physical features, but these codes are for something else. Each station has its own signals, ways of marking safe routes and danger zones. Wade's men have found some of our old trail markers, but these are different. These are the ones James created for emergencies when everything else fails. Nathan secured the notebook and transit in his saddlebags, his mind already working on ways to integrate this new knowledge into their defense plans. Wade thought he was fighting simple farmers, but he was actually facing a sophisticated network that had been preparing for this kind of threat for decades. "One more thing," Catherine said as they mounted up. "That root cellar on your farm, the hidden room, there's something else there besides documents. James left a message specifically for you, sealed until it was needed. Miss Rachel says it's time you read it." As they parted ways, Nathan headed toward Judge Monroe's with a deeper understanding of the legacy he'd inherited, the skills he'd learned from James, the knowledge he'd been passing on to Benjamin. It wasn't just about survival or protection. It was about maintaining a balance that had been carefully crafted over decades. The sun was setting as he rode on, the transit and notebook adding weight to his saddlebags, but lightening the burden of his purpose. Ghost River Jack hadn't just been an outlaw fighting corruption. He'd been part of something larger, something that was still growing, still adapting to protect what mattered most. Judge James Monroe's residence sat on the outskirts of Helena, a modest house that betrayed nothing of its owner's importance. But Nathan, approaching in the deepening twilight, noted the carefully positioned outbuildings that offered clear sightlines in all directions. The judge had learned caution during his years of supporting their cause. A weathered-looking man in his 60s appeared on the porch, his silver hair and wire-rimmed spectacles giving him a scholarly appearance that masked a sharp, tactical mind. "Been wondering when you'd show up," Monroe called out softly. "Sarah telegraphed 2 days ago." "Quite a woman you married. She's been coordinating with my clerk, gathering evidence while Wade's men think they're watching a simple farmer's wife." Inside the judge's study, Nathan found walls lined with law books and territorial maps. But hidden behind a rotating bookcase lay another room, one filled with different kinds of documentation, corporate records, land surveys, and evidence of corruption spanning decades. "Wade's getting sloppy," Monroe announced, pulling out several documents. "His men tried to intimidate my clerk last week. Poor fools didn't realize young William is Mary Cooper's nephew. You remember Mary? The widow who stood against the cattle barons," Nathan recalled. "Exactly. William's been carefully copying every document Wade's people file, noting which ones disappear mysteriously from official records." Monroe spread several papers across his desk. "Look at these land transfer patterns. They're not just buying property. They're systematically erasing every trace of the legal framework James helped create." A knock at the study door revealed William himself, a sharp-featured young man carrying fresh telegrams. "More reports from Silver Creek," he announced. "Wade's men are moving equipment in, but they're being watched. The Cooper family's hands, all 20 of them, have been tracking every movement." Monroe smiled slightly. "Mary made sure her people understood the importance of documentation. They're building a case that even the most corrupt judge couldn't ignore. But that's not why I asked Sarah to send you here." He moved to a hidden safe, retrieving a leather portfolio that made Nathan's breath catch. The familiar handwriting on its cover was James Hawkins, clear, precise strokes that had once guided so many operations. "James left this with me just before, Monroe explained. Said it was for the day when the mining interests tried to reclaim the territory. Inside is something more valuable than any legal document. The portfolio contained lists of names, hundreds of them, organized by region and capability. Nathan recognized some. Families they'd helped, people who'd supported their cause, but others were new. "It's not just a list of allies," Monroe explained. "It's a blueprint for resistance." James didn't just help people keep their land. He built connections between them. Each name represents a point in a network that spans 3 territories. William pointed to specific entries: The Richardson family in Sweetwater Valley. Their oldest son works for the Territorial Telegraph Office now. The Martinez clan near Eagles Pass. They control half the freight contracts in the region. Even my own position as the judge's clerk, none of it's accidental. James was planning for the future, Monroe continued. He knew the mining interests would return, but with different tactics. That's why he made sure the children of people we helped found their way into strategic positions. Wade thinks he's just fighting scattered farmers, but he's actually facing a coordinated network that's been growing for a generation. A quiet commotion outside drew their attention. Through cleverly positioned mirrors, another of James's innovations, they observed several riders approaching. But instead of Wade's men, Nathan recognized faces from his past. Michael Reeves, Marcus's son, now a successful freight company owner, Isabella Martinez, whose family controlled key mountain passes, Thomas Cooper, Mary's eldest, who'd built a legitimate business empire while maintaining his mother's commitment to justice. They've been waiting, Monroe explained as the riders dismounted. Each of them carries a piece of the puzzle James created. Michael's freight contracts let him monitor corporate movements across the territory. Isabella's network of mountain camps provides safe havens for displaced families. Thomas's business connections give us eyes and ears in places Wade would never suspect. The meeting that followed demonstrated how deeply James's influence had spread. Each new arrival brought not just information, but resources and capabilities that fit together like pieces of an intricate machine. Wade's operation is bigger than we thought, Michael reported, spreading out shipping manifests. They're bringing in equipment through my competitors' routes, trying to hide their movements. But every freight house in the territory has someone who remembers what the mining companies did 30 years ago. Isabella added her own intelligence. Their men are pressing hard against small ranchers, but they're meeting unexpected resistance. Families who seemed isolated are suddenly finding support from neighbors. Old caches of supplies are appearing just when needed. Because they're following the patterns James established, Thomas explained, pointing to specific locations on the maps. Each property he helped protect was chosen to support others nearby. Wade thinks he's picking off weak targets, but he's actually attacking points in a defensive network that's been in place for decades. William brought in more telegrams, these from sources scattered across the territory. Wade's backing is starting to show cracks. Two of his major investors pulled out yesterday after their own properties mysteriously lost water access. They don't realize they were targeted using James's old maps of underground water sources. Monroe watched Nathan absorb the flow of information, noting how his former protégé's tactical mind was already forming connections. This is what James was building toward, the judge said quietly. Not just protection for individual farms, but a system that could defend itself. Each person here represents dozens more. Families, workers, honest business owners who remember what it means to stand together. And now they need Ghost River Jack again, Isabella added, her dark eyes meeting Nathan's. Not as an outlaw this time, but as someone who can help them remember how to fight smart against corruption. Michael nodded in agreement. Wade's people are using legal pressure, economic threats, hired muscle, but James taught us that the best defense uses every tool available. We've got evidence that could stand in any court, business connections that could strangle their operations, and if necessary, Thomas finished, we've got people who remember the old ways. The ghost paths aren't just trails anymore. They're trade routes, communication lines, supply networks. Wade thinks he's fighting the past, but he's actually facing something that's evolved beyond what even James imagined. As the meeting continued into the night, Nathan felt the weight of both past and future. Each person in the room represented a different aspect of resistance. Legal, economic, tactical. Together, they formed something powerful yet subtle, A network that could fight corruption on multiple levels simultaneously. Your farm's not just strategically located, Monroe explained as they studied the maps. It's a symbol, Ghost River Jack, turning honest work into another way of protecting what's right. That's why Wade wants it so badly, not just for the water rights, but because taking it would break people's hope. The night deepened as plans were made and resources coordinated. Nathan watched these children of their old allies work together with practiced efficiency, realizing that James's legacy hadn't died. It had transformed into something more sophisticated than mere outlaws could achieve. The future of their resistance would combine the best of both worlds, legitimate power and shadow tactics, legal action and strategic pressure, public stands and quiet maneuvers. Wade thought he was fighting farmers, protecting their land, but he was about to face something far more complex, a network of justice that had been generations in the making. Near midnight, another arrival brought fresh intelligence. Emma Richardson, daughter of a rancher they'd helped years ago, now worked as a telegraph operator in Helena's main office. Her position gave her unique insights into Wade's communications. "They're getting desperate," she reported, laying out intercepted messages. She'd memorized and transcribed. 3 more investors pulled out this morning. Something about unexplained accidents with their personal water supplies. Her slight smile suggested these accidents weren't entirely coincidental. "Show him the property records," Monroe urged, and Emma produced a set of documents that revealed a disturbing pattern. "Wade's not just filing claims on water rights," she explained. "He's trying to establish a historical precedent. His lawyers are submitting backdated documents suggesting the mining companies had prior claims to these lands dating back 30 years. Nathan studied the forgeries with a professional eye. Good work, but they made mistakes. These paper types weren't available in the dates they're claiming." "Exactly," William confirmed. "But more importantly, we have James's original documentation. Every piece of land Wade's claiming was legally transferred through the Ghost River Company. The records may have vanished from county offices, but James never kept all his eggs in one basket," Thomas finished. "The true documents are scattered across the territory, held by families who remember what really happened. Wade can forge all the papers he wants. We can prove every fake." Michael Reeves spread out his freight company's ledgers, pointing to specific entries. "They're bringing in more than just water pumps. Hidden among legitimate shipments are components for industrial equipment. My people found these manifestations. They're planning to build dams, cut off entire watersheds." "That fits with what we've seen in Eagle Pass," Isabella added. "Their surveyors are marking sites for major construction. They want to control water flow across the whole region, but they don't understand the territory's real hydrology," Emma interjected. "Those dam sites they're choosing, according to James's surveys, they're all vulnerable to underground spring systems. One good flood season could undermine their entire operation." The group worked through the night, piecing together intelligence from various sources. Each person brought unique insights. Thomas's business acumen, Isabella's knowledge of mountain operations, Michael's understanding of supply lines. Together, they painted a picture of both threat and opportunity. "Wade's operation has a critical weakness," William observed, correlating different reports. "They're trying to work too quickly, expand too fast, makes them sloppy." "Because they know time isn't on their side," Monroe explained. "The territorial legislature meets in 3 weeks. There's a bill coming up about water rights regulation. If it passes, their entire strategy becomes illegal," Nathan finished, seeing the pattern. "That's why they're pushing so hard now. They need to establish control before the new laws take effect." Emma produced more telegrams. "They're already trying to influence the vote. Bribes, threats, the usual tactics, but they don't realize half. The legislators have connections to families we've helped over the years. The discussion turned to immediate actions. Each person had resources to contribute. Michael could slow critical equipment shipments through strategic mishaps. Isabella's mountain networks could provide safe routes for threatened families. Thomas's business connections could apply economic pressure to Wade's investors. But we need something more, Monroe mused. A way to coordinate everything, make each piece support the others. Nathan found himself studying James's old maps with new understanding. We've been thinking about the ghost paths as separate from regular routes, he said slowly. But what if we combined them? Use legitimate business operations to cover shadow movements? The idea caught fire. Michael's freight contracts could justify regular traffic along certain trails. Isabella's mountain camps could serve as both way stations and monitoring posts. Thomas's business network could provide cover for moving people and resources. Just like James taught us, Monroe said approvingly. The best defense uses every available tool, legitimate and otherwise. A quiet knock interrupted their planning. One of Monroe's trusted servants entered with an urgent message. Wade's men had been spotted moving in force toward the North Valley, where several key properties lay. They're not just targeting random farms anymore, Isabella observed, marking positions on their maps. They're trying to secure critical water access points before the legislature meets. Then we need to move faster, Nathan decided. Michael, how quickly can your freight operations be redirected? Already done, Michael replied. I've got wagons positioned at key points, ready to move people or supplies, looking like normal business traffic, but ready for anything. Thomas finished. My bank can handle the financial side. Any family forced out will find mysterious deposits appearing in their accounts, giving them resources to fight back legally. Emma added another layer to their strategy. The telegraph office has reliable operators in 3 key towns. We can coordinate responses faster than Wade's men can move. As dawn approached, the group had crafted something new, a resistance that operated on multiple levels simultaneously. Legal challenges would be supported by economic pressure. Public opposition would be reinforced by quiet action along the ghost paths. Each piece was designed to support the others, creating a defense Wade's operation couldn't easily counter. There's one more thing, Monroe said as the meeting wound down. James left something else with me. Not just documents or plans, but a message. He wrote it the night before everything changed. Said it was for when the time was right. The judge retrieved a sealed envelope from his safe. Inside, Nathan found a letter written in James's precise hand, its words reaching across years to address their current situation. To those who remember what justice means, if you're reading this, the mining interests have returned, as I always knew they would, but they'll come differently this time, with lawyers instead of guns, with papers instead of threats. They'll try to use the very laws we created against the people we sought to protect. But you have something they don't understand. You have a network built on trust, not greed, on protection, not power. The ghost paths were never just trails. They were connections between good people who remember what it means to stand together. Nathan. Ghost River, Jack. You'll understand this better than most. We weren't just outlaws fighting corruption. We were building something that could last, something that could adapt and grow stronger with time. The true power isn't in guns or gold or legal papers. It's in people who remember, who teach their children, who keep the paths open for those who need them. Wade and his kind will never understand this. They see only what they can take, not what we've built. Use everything I taught you, but don't be bound by it. The best strategies evolve, adapt to new challenges. You've already shown this by building an honest life that still protects what matters. Now help others do the same. The ghost paths are yours now. All of yours. Make them what they need to be for these times. James, The letter's words seemed to energize the group, giving their plans deeper purpose. They weren't just fighting Wade's operation. They were preserving and transforming a legacy of protection that had been generations in the making. As the first light of dawn crept over Helena, Nathan watched these children of their old allies prepare to return to their positions. Each carried pieces of their strategy, ready to coordinate actions that would seem unconnected to outsiders but would work together with precision, born of long preparation. The ghost paths were evolving, becoming something James might never have imagined but would surely have approved. Wade thought he was fighting farmers and outdated outlaws. Instead, he faced a sophisticated network that could oppose him on every front: legal, economic, tactical, and more. Dawn broke over Silver Creek Valley as Wade's men approached the Henderson farm, their confidence evident in their casual formation. 6 riders, led by Wade's Lieutenant Frank Carson, expected an easy operation: pressure another small farmer into selling, maybe arrange an accident if necessary. Instead, they found themselves riding into a carefully orchestrated response that would demonstrate the network's new capabilities. Tom Henderson stood on his porch, shotgun held casually but visibly. But unlike previous confrontations, he wasn't alone. Through carefully concealed positions, Nathan watched their plan unfold. Michael Reeves's freight wagons had arrived at the farm yesterday, looking like normal supply deliveries. Now they provided both cover and mobile barriers, strategically, positioned to control access to the property. "Morning, Henderson," Carson called out, his false friendliness carrying a familiar, threatening undertone. "Brought those papers Mr. Wade mentioned. Time to discuss your water rights situation." "Funny thing about those rights," Henderson replied, his voice carrying clearly in the morning air. "Had some interesting visitors yesterday. Seems the Territorial Surveyor's Office has some questions about Wade's claims." Carson's smile faltered slightly. This wasn't the script he'd expected. "Don't much care about bureaucrats' questions. We've got legitimate documents right here." "Those would be the documents dated 1875? A new voice joined the conversation as Judge Monroe's clerk, William, emerged from behind one of the wagons. "Fascinating. Considering that paper stock wasn't manufactured until 1882, I'm sure the Territorial Fraud Office will be very interested." Nathan noted the subtle shifts in Carson's men, the way they tensed, hands moving closer to weapons, but they'd already been outmaneuvered in ways they didn't yet understand. Isabella's people were positioned in the surrounding hills, while Thomas Cooper's business associates waited in town, ready to implement the economic pressure they'd planned. "This is private business," Carson growled. "Don't need outsiders interfering." Actually, Michael Reeves stepped into view, his freight, company's official documents in hand. "This became my business when you interfered with territorial commerce. These water rights you're claiming, they affect contracted delivery routes. Corporate interference with established trade paths carries significant penalties." The coordinated pressure continued as Emma Richardson's telegraph work bore fruit. A rider approached at speed, carrying official-looking documents. "Priority message from the territorial capital," he announced loudly. "Immediate review of all water rights claims ordered. All pending transfers suspended." Nathan watched Carson's confidence crumble as he faced opposition on multiple fronts simultaneously. This wasn't the simple intimidation scenario he'd expected. Instead of one desperate farmer, he faced a coordinated response that challenged Wade's operation legally, economically, and strategically. "Your employers might also be interested in this," William added, producing copies of Wade's secret documents, the ones Emma had intercepted, especially the parts about manipulating water access to force property sales, fraud, conspiracy, market manipulation, serious charges. Carson made one final attempt to salvage the situation. "Accidents happen," he said quietly, his threat clear. "To people and property. Might want to consider that before filing any official complaints." Like the accidents at the county records office, Isabella Martinez emerged from another position. Interesting timing, those fires. Almost like someone was trying to destroy evidence. Good thing we keep copies. Lots of copies scattered across the territory. The strategic beauty of their response wasn't just in its coordination, but in its legitimacy. Every action was technically legal, every pressure point precisely targeted. Wade's operation relied on shadows and threats. They were countered with documented evidence and official challenges. Carson and his men withdrew. Their mission not just failed, but compromised. As they rode away, Nathan gave a subtle signal. Along the ridgelines, carefully positioned observers began moving, ready to track the riders and document their next moves. "They'll run straight to Wade," Michael observed, joining Nathan at his observation post. "But that's exactly what we want." Nathan nodded. This confrontation had been carefully chosen, the first demonstration of their new capabilities. Henderson's farm was strategically important, but it was also perfectly positioned for their purpose. Every aspect of their response could be legally documented, creating precedents they could use in future confrontations. "Williams already filed the official complaints," Thomas reported, approaching with fresh intelligence. Emma's network confirmed. Wade received the news about the territorial review. "His investors are getting nervous," Isabella added her own update. "My people tracked 3 of Wade's other operations, pulling back, consolidating their positions. They're realizing this won't be as easy as they thought." The group gathered in Henderson's barn, now serving as a temporary command center. Maps and documents covered improvised tables, each showing different aspects of their coordinated response. "Wade's operation depends on isolation," Nathan explained, marking key positions. "They target properties one at a time, using pressure. That seems unconnected, but we've shown their tactics are coordinated, part of a larger conspiracy." "The evidence William filed creates legal challenges they'll have to address," Thomas added. "Every move they make now will be scrutinized. And, with Michael's freight contracts involved, they've got the Territorial Commerce Board looking into their operations," Michael finished. "Plus, Isabella's documentation of their equipment movements proves they're planning large-scale water diversion," Isabella confirmed. "The Territorial Engineer's office is very interested in unauthorized dam construction plans." Nathan studied the maps, seeing how each piece of their response supported the others. Wade's operation had been built on shadows and intimidation. They were countering with light and legitimacy, using official channels to expose and constrain corrupt activities. "There's more," Emma arrived with fresh intelligence. "Wade's biggest investor just telegraphed demanding explanations. Seems he's concerned about possible legal exposure. And 3 more property transfers were just suspended pending review. The victory wasn't just in stopping one operation, but in demonstrating their network's capabilities. Wade's men had expected to pressure one farmer. Instead, they'd faced coordinated resistance that challenged their entire strategy. "James would have appreciated this," Judge Monroe commented, arriving to witness the results. "Using their own methods against them, legitimate business concerns, legal challenges, official investigations. Everything is documented and properly filed." Nathan nodded, remembering his mentor's teachings. "The best defense uses every available tool. Wade's operation relies on seeming legitimate while acting corruptly. We're making their corruption visible, while operating completely within the law." The afternoon brought reports of Wade's response. His men were pulling back from 3 other planned operations, suddenly cautious about leaving evidence of their activities. The investors' concerns had sparked others, creating financial pressure that complemented their legal challenges. "But they're not done," Nathan warned as they planned their next moves. "Wade's type doesn't give up easily. They'll try to regroup, find new approaches." "That's exactly what we want," Thomas replied. "Every time they adapt, We'll have new opportunities to expose their methods. Each response teaches us more about their operation while demonstrating our capabilities to others facing similar pressure. The sun was setting as Nathan prepared to return to his farm. The day's events had proven their network's effectiveness, but he knew this was just the beginning. Wade would retaliate, probably targeting what he thought was their weakest point. "He'll come after your place next," Isabella predicted, reading his thoughts. "Try to break our momentum by taking down Ghost River Jack's operation." "Let him try," Nathan replied quietly. "The farm's ready, and Wade's about to learn that some threats can't be fought with just money and muscle." As he rode home through gathering darkness, Nathan reflected on how their resistance had evolved. The ghost paths were still active, but they now served a broader purpose, connecting legitimate operations that could stand against corruption in ways mere outlaws never could. Wade thought he was fighting scattered farmers, protecting their land. Instead, he faced a sophisticated network that could challenge him legally, economically, and strategically. The quiet farmer he'd tried to pressure had helped create something more powerful than any outlaw legend, a system of justice that worked in both light and shadow. The first stars appeared as Nathan approached his property, their light reflecting off the carefully positioned mirrors Sarah had maintained in his absence. His wife's intelligence work had been crucial to their success, coordinating information flow while appearing to be simply a farmer's spouse. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but today they'd proven James's vision could work. The ghost paths had evolved, becoming something that could fight corruption with truth as well as cunning, with legal power as well as strategic skill. As Nathan approached his farm, he noticed the subtle signs Sarah had arranged to indicate all was well. The lantern in the upper window positioned just so, the arrangement of tools near the barn that would have been different if trouble had come. Benjamin met him at the stable, the boy's growing tactical awareness evident in how he'd maintained watch positions during his father's absence. "Wade's men rode by twice," Benjamin reported quietly, helping with the horse. "But they stayed on. The main road. Mr. Cooper's freight wagons arrived with the supplies you requested. Everything stored in the root cellar, just like you showed me." Inside, Sarah had transformed their kitchen table into an intelligence center, disguised as ordinary farm paperwork. Letters from neighboring families, carefully coded, revealed Wade's operations facing resistance across the territory. The Henderson. "Success is already having effects," she explained, sorting through recent messages. 3 more families stood up to Wade's men today. The Parkers refused to sell, the Johnson place withdrew their transfer agreement, and the Whitakers— She smiled slightly. Somehow their water rights paperwork disappeared from Wade's office, reappeared at the territorial registry instead. "Emma's work?" Nathan asked, recognizing the subtle hand of their telegraph operator. "Along with help from Judge Monroe's office. William's been very busy filing official copies of documents Wade thought were destroyed. It seems every time they try to pressure someone now, evidence of their methods mysteriously surfaces in official channels." A knock at the door revealed Rachel Carter's youngest daughter, Lisa, arriving with fresh intelligence disguised as ordinary. "Gossip. Wade called a meeting in town," she reported as Sarah served coffee. "His investors are asking uncomfortable questions about legal exposure. 2 pulled their funding completely after those documents William filed became public record." Nathan studied the maps spread across their table, noting new markings Sarah had added, showing Wade's forces consolidating, pulling back from exposed positions. Their coordinated response at Henderson's farm had done more than stop one operation. It had revealed the full scope of their network's capabilities. "There's something else," Lisa continued. "Wade's bringing in outside help. A man named Harrison, supposed to be some kind of expert in handling rural resistance for mining companies." Samuel Harrison. Nathan's interest sharpened. He knew that name from his Ghost River Jack days, a ruthless operator who specialized in breaking up organized opposition to corporate land grabs. He arrived this afternoon, Sarah confirmed. Emma intercepted the telegrams. They're planning something big, trying to regain momentum after the Henderson setback. Benjamin, who had been quietly maintaining watch, signaled from the window. More riders approached, but these were friendly. Isabella Martinez and Michael Reeves, bringing updates from their various operations. Harrison's presence changes things, Isabella announced as they gathered around the maps. He's got a reputation for finding pressure points, ways to break apart cooperative resistance. But he's used to fighting farmers and ranchers working together, Michael added. He doesn't understand what he's really facing. Our network goes deeper than just rural cooperation. Sarah produced more intelligence, reports from town showing Wade's operation facing challenges they hadn't anticipated. Bank loans were being suddenly reviewed, supply contracts questioned. Transportation arrangements are mysteriously complicated. Thomas's business network is already causing problems, she explained. Wade's local credit is drying up. Suppliers are requiring cash payments up front. Even the telegraph office is experiencing technical difficulties with his communications. Nathan absorbed these updates, seeing how their victory at Henderson's farm had created opportunities for broader action. Wade's operation relied on appearing legitimate while acting corruptly. Their response had exposed the corruption while operating completely within the law. Harrison will try to isolate key points, he predicted, studying the patterns of Wade's retreating forces. Target properties he thinks are crucial to our network, but he doesn't understand the real connections. Isabella nodded in agreement. He's looking for obvious links, business partnerships, family relations, shared water rights. He won't see how deep James's planning really went. Each property in their network supported others in ways that weren't visible on any official document. Underground springs mapped by James's transit-connected watersheds that appeared separate. Old ghost paths, now disguised as ordinary ranch trails, provided communication and support routes that wouldn't appear on Harrison's tactical assessments. We should expect him to target your farm first, Michael observed. Try to break our momentum by taking down what he thinks is our center of operations. Let him try, Sarah replied with quiet confidence. The root cellar is fully stocked, the escape tunnels are clear, and every approach to the property is watched by people he won't even know to look for. The night deepened as they refined their plans, incorporating this new threat into their strategy. Harrison's arrival meant Wade was escalating, but it also meant their network had proven its effectiveness. They weren't just fighting individual attempts at corruption, they were facing an operation that recognized them as a serious threat. Benjamin, maintaining his watch position, signaled another arrival. Judge Monroe's clerk appeared, carrying documents that would further strengthen their position. The Territorial Review Board approved our petitions, William announced, spreading papers across the table. Every water rights transfer Wade's filed in the past month is now officially suspended pending investigation. And his investors' lawyers are asking very specific questions about certain documentation that surfaced. The pieces of their response continued coming together. Legal challenges supported by economic pressure, public opposition reinforced by quiet action along the ghost paths. Each element designed to complement the others, creating a defense that operated on multiple levels simultaneously. 3 days after the Henderson Farm confrontation, Samuel Harrison made his first significant move. It wasn't the direct attack they'd expected on Nathan's farm, but something more subtle and potentially more dangerous. Through the early morning mist, Nathan watched from a concealed position as Harrison's men established control points along Silver Creek's main trading route. Calling it a safety inspection station, Michael Reeves reported, joining Nathan at his observation post. They're stopping every wagon, checking cargo manifests, looking for specific supplies, water pipes, building materials, anything that could help farms maintain independent water access. The strategy was clever, using legitimate authority to isolate their network's support system. Harrison had identified one of their key strengths and was moving to cut it off, but he'd underestimated the depth of their preparation. "How many alternate routes are active?" Nathan asked, though he already suspected the answer. 8, Michael smiled slightly. "Using the old ghost paths James mapped. Harrison's men are watching the main road, but our supplies are moving through trails they don't even know exist. Isabella's people have already redirected 3 shipments this morning." A rider approached their position, Emma Richardson, carrying intelligence from her telegraph office. "Harrison's filed official papers with the Territorial Commerce Board," she reported, claiming security concerns about unauthorized transportation of restricted materials. He's trying to give his checkpoints legal standing. Nathan studied the valley through his spyglass, noting how Harrison had positioned his men. The placement was professional, controlling key intersections while maintaining clear lines of sight. But there was something else about the pattern that tickled his tactical instincts. He's not just watching for supplies, Nathan realized. Look at those positions. They're mapping traffic patterns. Every wagon they stop, every rider they question. They're building a picture of how our network moves. "Already thought of that," Michael replied. "We're feeding them false patterns, regular wagons making ordinary deliveries, while the real support moves through different routes each time. Thomas's business contacts are helping, providing legitimate cover for increased traffic in certain areas." Emma added her own update. "Harrison's reputation is working against him. His presence here got telegraphed to some newspaper contacts Judge Monroe cultivated. They're asking uncomfortable questions about why a known corporate enforcer is interfering with territorial commerce." Their conversation was interrupted by a series of subtle bird calls, signals from Isabella's watchers indicating more of Harrison's men approaching. The 3 observers withdrew deeper into cover, watching as a patrol passed below their position. "They're well trained," Nathan noted. "Professional mercenaries, not just local muscle. Harrison's building towards something bigger than just controlling supply lines. We've seen similar movements near 3 other key properties," Emma confirmed. "The Mitchell Place, Cooper's Ridge, and especially around Crystal Springs. They're establishing a presence, making their authority visible." "Testing responses," Nathan translated, "watching how different areas react to pressure. Harrison's reputation is built on finding weak points in organized resistance. He's looking for patterns he can exploit." A messenger arrived from Judge Monroe's office, one of William's trusted runners. The news confirmed their suspicions. Harrison had filed multiple legal notices, each designed to establish official oversight of different aspects of territorial commerce. "He's trying to use territorial law against us," Michael observed, reading the documents. "Same way we used it against Wade, but he's missing something crucial." Nathan nodded. "James didn't just help people keep their land. He made sure they understood how to protect it legally. Every property in our network has documentation that predates these new regulations." "Speaking of documentation," Emma interjected, "Harrison's been asking questions about Ghost River Jack. Seems very interested in the old stories, especially anything connecting them to current property owners." This wasn't surprising. Harrison's method involved finding leverage points, ways to pressure key figures in resistance movements. But his investigation would lead nowhere useful. James had been thorough in erasing those connections, leaving only legends that couldn't be traced to specific individuals. "Let him chase ghosts," Nathan said quietly. "While he's looking for outlaws, we'll keep building legal challenges to his operation." Speaking of which, he turned to Michael, who produced a set of carefully prepared documents. Thomas's business network came through. We've got proof Harrison's security checkpoints are selectively enforcing inspections, only targeting certain farms and ranches, ignoring others. Clear evidence of discriminatory practice, which violates territorial commerce laws, Emma added with satisfaction. Judge Monroe's already preparing the injunctions. But there's more. Those newspaper contacts I mentioned, they're not just asking questions about Harrison. They're investigating the pattern of property transfers Wade's been arranging. The morning sun burned away the mist as they refined their responses to this new phase of the conflict. Harrison's arrival had expanded the scope of their struggle, but it had also created new opportunities. His very presence, a known corporate enforcer with a documented history of breaking up farmer resistance, helped prove the organized nature of Wade's operation. We need to be careful, Nathan warned. Harrison's not just Wade's enforcer. He's got experience fighting organized resistance. He'll be looking for leadership figures, trying to identify key players he can target. That's why we're maintaining the appearance of scattered opposition, Michael confirmed. Every legal challenge comes from a different source. Every business pressure appears unconnected. Even our supply network looks like individual farmers helping neighbors, not coordinated support. Emma's telegraph network had proven invaluable for this approach. Messages passed through multiple operators, each seeing only a small part of larger communications. Harrison's men might intercept individual telegrams, but they'd find no pattern revealing the full scope of their organization. There's something else, the messenger from Monroe's office spoke up. Harrison's men have been asking specific questions about water sources, not just surface rights, but underground springs, seasonal patterns. Nathan's attention sharpened. This suggested Harrison suspected something about James's deeper strategy, how the properties in their network were connected by more than just proximity. "Show me exactly where they've been surveying," he requested, spreading out their maps. The pattern that emerged was concerning. Harrison's men weren't just watching commerce, they were systematically investigating sites James had identified as crucial to the territory's water system. He's looking for real connections, Nathan realized. Not just roads and supply lines, but how water flows through the territory. If he figures out what James mapped, he won't, Michael assured him. Those surveys are hidden in multiple locations. Even if he finds one set, he won't see the whole picture. And meanwhile, Emma finished, every hour his men spend stopping wagons and questioning farmers creates more evidence of corporate interference with territorial commerce. Judge Monroe's building is quite a case. A series of signal flashes from a distant ridge caught their attention. Isabella's watchers had spotted something significant. Through their spyglasses, they observed a new group arriving, surveyors with professional equipment escorted by Harrison's men. "Right on schedule," Michael commented. "Thomas's sources said they were bringing in experts. They're going to try to establish new water rights claims based on technical surveys." "Let them survey," Nathan replied, a slight smile playing on his lips. "They're using modern equipment, looking for surface features. James used that modified transit of his, the one that could detect underground water flows. Their maps won't show what he found." The morning's observations had revealed both threat and opportunity. Harrison was expanding the conflict, bringing in professional resources and legal strategies. But each escalation created new vulnerabilities they could exploit. "Keep our supply lines moving," Nathan instructed Michael. "But make sure Harrison's men see enough regular traffic to think their checkpoints are working. Emma, make sure those newspaper questions keep coming, especially about why corporate mercenaries are interfering with territorial commerce." The sun climbed higher as they separated, each moving to coordinate different aspects of their response. Harrison had brought the fight to a new level, but their network was designed for exactly this kind of escalation. Wade thought bringing in professional help would break their resistance. Instead, he'd given them new opportunities to expose corporate overreach. Nathan paused at a vantage point, watching Harrison's men continue their systematic survey of the valley. The enforcer's reputation was built on breaking apart farmer resistance, finding weak points he could exploit. But he was facing something different here. Not just organized opposition, but a carefully crafted network that could adapt to any pressure. The ghost paths were more than just trails now. They were channels for moving supplies past corporate. Checkpoints, routes for sharing information despite surveillance, ways of maintaining connections that Harrison's men couldn't detect or disrupt. Wade's operation had expanded the conflict, but their response would come from both shadow and light, using every tool James had prepared for this moment. Back at Nathan's farm, Sarah had transformed their barn's hidden room into a coordination center. Maps covered the walls, each marked with Harrison's new checkpoints and the alternate routes they'd established to bypass them. Benjamin maintained watch from the hayloft, using the observation techniques Nathan had taught him to monitor approaches. 4. More families received official notices today, Sarah reported, sorting through intelligence gathered by their network. Harrison's men are claiming safety inspections give them authority to access private water systems. The Turners refused, found their access road mysteriously blocked by a landslide an hour later. Not very subtle, Nathan observed, noting the location on their maps. Harrison usually works with more finesse. He's moving too fast, making mistakes. Because he's under pressure, Thomas Cooper added, arriving with fresh financial intelligence. Wade's investors are getting nervous. 3 more pulled their backing after those newspaper stories about corporate mercenaries interfering with local commerce. Harrison's been given a deadline to show results. The pressure explained Harrison's aggressive tactics, but it also revealed opportunities. Rushed operations left evidence, created patterns they could document and challenge legally. Judge Monroe's office just filed these, Thomas continued, producing legal documents. Formal complaints about discriminatory inspection practices. Every checkpoint Harrison establishes has to justify its actions under territorial commerce laws. Sarah pointed to specific locations on their maps. Notice how they're positioning their surveyors. They're trying to establish new water claims based on technical measurements, but they're missing crucial data. Nathan studied the pattern. The corporate surveyors were using modern equipment, focusing on surface features and obvious water sources. But James's modified transit had mapped something far more complex: underground flows, seasonal patterns, and connections between watersheds that weren't visible to conventional surveys. Let them waste time with their fancy equipment, he said. Every survey they file becomes part of the official record. When we reveal James's more accurate maps, it'll prove they're either incompetent or deliberately misrepresenting water resources. A coded knock announced Isabella Martinez's arrival. She carried reports from her mountain observers, detailing Harrison's attempts to track their supply movements. His men are frustrated, she reported with satisfaction. They keep seeing signs of cargo movement, but can't figure out how we're bypassing their checkpoints. One group spent 6 hours yesterday following false trails we left. The strategy was working. While Harrison's forces focused on visible routes, their real supply network operated through paths that existed on no official map. Each failed attempt to intercept shipments forced him to expand his operations, spreading his men thinner while creating more evidence of corporate interference. There's something else, Isabella added, her expression serious. Harrison's bringing in more than just surveyors. My people spotted specialized mining equipment being assembled near Crystal Springs, the kind used for deep drilling. This was concerning news. Deep drilling could potentially locate the underground water sources James had mapped, the hidden connections that made their network of properties so effective at controlling water flow. They still won't find everything, Nathan assured them. James didn't just map water sources. He understood how they connected, how seasonal changes affected flow patterns. That knowledge isn't written down anywhere. It's passed through families who've worked this land for generations. A signal from Benjamin interrupted their discussion. Through carefully positioned mirrors, they observed a group of riders approaching, not Harrison's men, but representatives from 3 families who'd received inspection notices. "This is good," Sarah noted. "Harrison's pressure is pushing more people to seek help. Each family that stands up to him becomes another point of resistance." The meeting that followed demonstrated how their network had evolved. The families brought more than just complaints. They carried documentation of Harrison's methods, evidence of coordinated pressure tactics that could be added to Judge Monroe's legal challenges. Harrison's making the same mistake Wade did. Thomas observed after the families departed with new resources and guidance. He thinks he's fighting individual farmers. He doesn't realize every move he makes strengthens the connections between properties, builds evidence of organized corporate interference. Nathan studied their updated maps, seeing how Harrison's expansion of the conflict had actually reinforced their position. Each new checkpoint created opportunities for legal challenges. Every survey revealed the limitations of corporate understanding. Their network wasn't just resisting, it was adapting, growing stronger as pressure increased. "Send word to Michael," he instructed Sarah. "It's time to implement the next phase. Let's show Harrison what happens when he tries to control every route into the valley." The afternoon brought reports of their countermoves taking effect. Michael's freight company had officially filed complaints about interference with legitimate commerce. Thomas's business network had begun questioning the legality of Harrison's inspection authority. Judge Monroe's office was systematically challenging every new regulation Harrison tried to establish, but their most effective response came through quieter channels. The ghost paths, maintained and expanded over years, let them move supplies and information past every checkpoint. Harrison's men might control the main roads, but the real strength of their network flowed through routes that existed only in the memories of those James had taught to read the land. The sun was setting as Nathan reviewed their progress. Harrison had expanded the conflict, bringing in professional resources and legal strategies. But each escalation had revealed new weaknesses they could exploit, new opportunities to expose corporate overreach while strengthening their own position. The ghost paths were proving their worth in ways James might never have imagined. They weren't just trails for outlaws anymore. They were channels for legitimate resistance, routes for maintaining connections that corporate power couldn't detect or disrupt. As darkness fell, Nathan watched Harrison's men changing shifts at their checkpoints, maintaining their illusion of control. The enforcer's reputation was built on breaking apart farmer resistance, but he was facing something unique here. A network that could fight through both legal channels and hidden paths, using every tool James had prepared for this moment. The quiet farmer Wade had tried to pressure was helping transform their resistance into something more powerful than any outlaw legend. They were building a defense that worked in both light and shadow, protecting what mattered through truth, as well as cunning, through legal power as well as strategic skill. The pre-dawn hours at Nathan's farm hummed with quiet activity. In the converted barn loft, Emma Richardson had established a sophisticated communication hub, combining her telegraph expertise with the old ghost path signals. Multiple lines ran through carefully concealed routes, allowing them to coordinate responses across the territory while monitoring Wade and Harrison's operations. 3 more corporate survey teams moving into position, Emma reported, translating coded messages. They're concentrating around Crystal Springs, just like Isabella predicted. But there's something odd about their equipment. Nathan studied the detailed descriptions their observers had provided. Those aren't just survey tools. See these components they're assembling? They're building something bigger. Sarah, who had been coordinating intelligence from various sources, produced a technical document Thomas's business contacts had obtained. Harrison's requisitioned specialized drilling equipment, the kind used for tapping deep aquifers. They're not just mapping water sources anymore. They're planning to access underground water directly, Nathan realized. Bypass the surface, rights entirely. The strategy was clever, but revealed Harrison's fundamental misunderstanding of the territory's hydrology. Michael Reeves arrived with fresh intelligence from his freight operations. Wade's bringing in more than just equipment. Corporate lawyers arrived yesterday, holed up in the Helena Hotel. They're preparing some kind of legal offensive. Right on schedule, Judge Monroe's clerk William commented, joining them with a stack of documents. Harrison's men have been gathering depositions from certain landowners, carefully selected testimony about water access disputes. They're building a case for territorial intervention. Nathan spread their maps across the planning table, noting how Harrison's operations formed a pattern that went deeper than simple intimidation. He's coordinating legal pressure with physical control. Each survey team's position corresponds to a property they're targeting with these depositions. But they've made a crucial mistake, Sarah pointed out. Look at the properties they've chosen for testimony. Every one of them has connections to Wade's investors. We can prove these complaints are orchestrated. The morning light strengthened as they refined their response. Emma's telegraph network had already begun spreading strategic information to key allies. Isabella's mountain observers tracked corporate movements, while Thomas's business contacts monitored financial maneuvering. Harrison's trying to isolate individual properties, Nathan explained, marking positions on their maps. Cut them off from support, then pressure them with legal challenges backed by technical surveys. But he doesn't understand what he's really facing. A quiet knock announced Rachel Carter's arrival. The way station operator carried fresh intelligence about corporate movements, but also something more valuable, evidence of their network's growing strength. 5 more families reached out yesterday, Rachel reported. Not just farmers facing pressure, but merchants, freight operators, even a bank clerk. They remember the stories about Ghost River Jack, about how James's network protected people. They want to help. This was a crucial development. Their resistance wasn't just maintaining existing connections, it was expanding, drawing in people with diverse skills and resources. Each new ally brought different capabilities to their network. Show them what Harrison's doing to Crystal Springs, Nathan instructed. Let them see how corporate development threatens everyone's water access, not just individual farms. The strategy worked at multiple levels. While Harrison focused on controlling key properties, their network grew stronger through seemingly unrelated connections. The bank clerk provided early warning of corporate financial moves. Merchants adjusted supply patterns to support pressured families. Freight operators found new ways to bypass checkpoints. We're not just resisting anymore, Sarah observed. We're building something bigger than Wade or Harrison can see. Every move they make brings more people to our cause. William brought additional documents, evidence of corporate overreach that could be officially filed once they had sufficient support. Judge Monroe says timing is crucial. We need to coordinate legal challenges with public exposure of their methods. Nathan studied the documents, seeing how each piece could support their larger strategy. Harrison expects resistance from farmers and ranchers. He's not watching for opposition from merchants, bankers, territorial officials. Let's show him how deep our network really runs. Emma's telegraph key clicked with fresh intelligence. Corporate. Surveyors had begun drilling near Crystal Springs, but they'd encountered unexpected problems. Underground water flows weren't matching their calculations, making their equipment ineffective. James's transit, Nathan smiled slightly. His surveys didn't just map water sources, they showed how everything connects. Harrison's experts are working from incomplete data, trying to control something they don't truly understand. The morning brought more allies seeking connection with their network. A printer from Helena, whose family had been helped by Ghost River Jack years ago, offered to publish evidence of corporate interference. A territorial surveyor, remembering how James had protected small landowners, provided copies of official water tables that contradicted Wade's claims. Each new connection strengthens all the others, Sarah noted, updating their coordination maps. Harrison thinks he's fighting scattered resistance. He doesn't see how every pressure point he creates actually builds our network stronger. The strategy session was interrupted by an urgent signal from Benjamin's observation post. Through their mirror network, they watched a corporate legal team approaching several properties simultaneously, serving papers that demanded water access inspections. "Now we'll see if the network holds," Nathan said quietly. But he needn't have worried. Within hours, reports came in showing coordinated resistance. Properties served with inspection demands immediately filed counterclaims, using documentation William had prepared. Merchants suddenly discovered supply problems that delayed corporate operations. Roads needed for survey equipment mysteriously required emergency maintenance. "They still think they're fighting farmers protecting water rights," Michael observed. "They don't realize they're facing a network that can respond at every level, legal, economic, logistical." The afternoon brought proof of their network's effectiveness. Harrison's survey teams, frustrated by equipment problems and local resistance, began pulling back to regroup. Wade's lawyers, facing coordinated legal challenges from multiple sources, found themselves overwhelmed by the complexity of response needed. "But this is just the beginning," Nathan cautioned as they planned next steps. "Harrison's too experienced to give up easily. He'll analyze what went wrong, try to identify patterns in our resistance." "Let him try," Rachel replied confidently. "The real patterns aren't visible on any document or map. They're in the connections between people, in the trust James built and we've maintained. Harrison's looking for an organization he can break apart. Instead, he's facing a community that grows stronger under pressure." As evening approached, Nathan reviewed their network's expansion. New allies brought fresh capabilities while existing connections adapted to changing threats. The ghost paths weren't just trails anymore. They were channels of support flowing through the territory in ways corporate power couldn't track or control. "James would be proud," Sarah said softly, watching signals flash between observation posts. "He didn't just build escape routes and hiding places. He created something that could grow, adapt, become stronger as needed." Nathan nodded, remembering his mentor's teachings. The best defenses weren't walls or weapons, but connections between people who remembered what it meant to stand together. Wade and Harrison thought they were fighting simple farmers. Instead, they faced a network that could respond to any pressure, adapt to any threat, and grow stronger with each challenge. The sun set over Crystal Springs as their expanded network continued its work. Harrison's men might control roads and legal papers, but the real strength of their resistance flowed through channels that existed only in the trust between people who remembered Ghost River Jack's protection and chose to continue that legacy. In their own ways, a coded message arrived from Thomas Cooper's business network as night fell. Wade's operation was experiencing unexpected complications beyond just legal challenges and local resistance. Supply contracts were being questioned, requiring extensive documentation. Bank loans needed additional review. Transportation arrangements faced mysterious delays. "It's beautiful in its simplicity," Thomas explained, joining them to review the effects. "Every business transaction they attempt now requires extra scrutiny, not because of any obvious opposition, but due to seemingly unrelated concerns about corporate reliability." Emma's telegraph network had captured Wade's frustrated responses. "His messages to investors are getting desperate," she reported. They're demanding explanations for mounting expenses and delays. Harrison's reputation for quick results isn't holding up. Nathan studied their updated coordination maps, noting how each apparent setback for their opponents actually strengthened their position. Corporate attempts to control key water sources had united previously neutral parties against them. The Territorial Commerce Board just opened a formal investigation, William announced, arriving with fresh legal documents. It seems there are irregularities in how Wade's operation obtained certain permits. Judge Monroe made sure the investigation committee includes people whose families remember Ghost River Jack's protection. Sarah added another layer to their strategy. The Henderson success inspired others. 3 more properties targeted by Harrison's surveys have filed detailed complaints about corporate interference, each supported by documentation we've gathered. A quiet signal from their perimeter watch brought news of more families seeking connection with their network. These weren't just farmers facing pressure, but skilled craftsmen, merchants, and even a territorial surveyor whose grandfather had been helped by James years ago. Each new ally brings different capabilities, Rachel observed. The surveyor can challenge Harrison's technical claims. Merchants can adjust supply lines. Even the blacksmith who joined yesterday, his skills with metalwork let us improve. Our communication equipment. Nathan watched their network expand in ways Wade and Harrison couldn't detect. While corporate forces focused on controlling obvious points of resistance, quiet strength flowed through connections built on trust and shared purpose. Harrison's made another mistake, Isabella reported, arriving with intelligence from her mountain observers. His men are focusing entirely on water sources shown on official maps. They've completely missed the seasonal springs James documented, the hidden reservoirs that keep whole valleys irrigated during dry months. This revealed a crucial weakness in corporate strategy. Wade's operation relied on technical surveys and legal documents, trying to control what they could measure and record. But James had understood the true power in the territory flowed through knowledge passed down through generations of people working the land. "Show me exactly where they're drilling," Nathan requested, spreading out James's original surveys. The pattern confirmed his suspicions. Harrison's experts were working from incomplete data, missing crucial connections between water sources. "They're using modern equipment," Michael noted, studying the corporate survey positions, but they don't understand how water really moves through this territory. Every test they run, every well they drill, just proves how little they know. Emma's telegraph key clicked with fresh intelligence. Corporate lawyers in Helena were preparing new legal challenges, but their strategy showed fundamental misunderstanding of territorial water law. "They're trying to apply Eastern precedents," William explained, reviewing the intercepted information, treating water rights like simple property claims. They don't realize James helped create special territorial statutes protecting communal water access. The night deepened as they coordinated responses across their expanded network. Each corporate pressure point became an opportunity to demonstrate the strength of connected resistance. Harrison's attempts to isolate properties actually created new bonds between neighbors. "Wade's getting desperate," Sarah reported, analyzing recent messages. "He's ordering Harrison to show results, threatening to bring in more enforcement teams. But every escalation just gives us more evidence of corporate overreach." Nathan studied their territory maps, seeing how James's careful planning was bearing fruit. Each property in their network supported others in ways that weren't visible on any official document. Underground springs, mapped by the modified transit-connected watersheds that appeared separate. Old ghost paths, now disguised as ordinary. Ranch trails provided communication and supply routes that corporate forces couldn't detect. "There's something else," Rachel added, sharing intelligence from her way station. "Families who faced similar pressure in other territories are reaching Out. They've heard about our success, want to learn how to build their own networks of resistance. This was perhaps their most significant achievement, not just protecting individual properties, but creating a model others could follow. Wade thought he was fighting local farmers. Instead, he faced a system of resistance that could spread beyond any boundaries he tried to establish. As midnight approached, their expanded network hummed with coordinated activity. Emma's telegraph operators passed coded messages between distant allies. Isabella's mountain observers tracked corporate movements. Thomas's business contacts maintained quiet pressure on Wade's financial operations. James saw this coming, Sarah said softly, watching signals flash between observation posts. Not just the corporate threats, but the need for connected resistance. Everything he taught, every path he mapped, was preparation for building something larger than any one person or group. Nathan nodded, remembering his mentor's wisdom. The best defense against corruption wasn't force or secrecy, but communities united in protecting what mattered. Wade and Harrison thought they fought scattered farmers. Instead, they faced an evolving network that grew stronger with each challenge. The first light of dawn found their expanded organization working with smooth efficiency. Harrison's men might control roads and legal papers, but true power flowed through connections they couldn't see or understand. The ghost paths had become something more than trails. They were channels of support flowing through the territory, carrying strength that grew with each new ally, each shared purpose, each remembered lesson about standing together against those who would steal what belonged to all. The dawn that marked their final confrontation with Wade's operation painted Devil's Fork Valley in shades of amber and gold. Nathan stood on his porch, James's modified transit mounted on a sturdy tripod, studying the territory's hidden water flows one last time. Everything they'd built, every strategy they'd developed, would be tested today. Wade's men are moving into position, Sarah reported, emerging from their command center. Harrison's got 3 teams approaching the critical points we identified. They think they've figured out the whole water system. Through the transit's specialized lenses, Nathan observed the underground currents their opponents couldn't see. Wade's operation had gathered impressive technical resources, modern survey equipment, professional engineers, detailed maps. But they still didn't understand what James had discovered decades ago. Water in this territory didn't just flow, it lived. All our people are ready, Michael Reeves confirmed, arriving with final confirmations. Every property in the network knows their part. Even Wade thinks he's pressured into submission. Isabella's mountain observers signaled the approach of Wade's main force. 40 riders, heavily armed, escorting wagons loaded with industrial pumping equipment. They moved with professional precision, clearly confident in their superior numbers. And firepower, let them come, Nathan said quietly. Everything is prepared. The plan they'd developed went beyond simple resistance. Each apparent vulnerability Wade's men approached had been carefully crafted. Every weakness Harrison thought he'd identified was part of a larger design. Telegraph lines are in place, Emma reported from her position. Judge Monroe's office is standing by. Thomas's business network is ready to implement the financial pressure the moment Wade makes his move. They watched as Harrison's survey teams began setting up their equipment at key points throughout the valley. The corporate engineers were thorough, professional, completely focused on their technical measurements. None of them noticed the subtle signs of preparation around them. "They're starting the pumps," Isabella called out. Through the transit's lenses, Nathan observed the effects. Wade's operation had brought impressive machinery, capable of moving thousands of gallons per minute. But they didn't understand what would happen when they tried to control water that followed paths older than their technology. The first sign that something was wrong came from the northern pump station. The equipment was working at full capacity, but the water levels in their collection tanks weren't rising as expected. Similar reports began arriving from other locations. "Now," Nathan signaled. Throughout the valley, their network began implementing James's final lesson about water management. Families who'd worked this land for generations opened carefully prepared channels, allowing the territory's natural water flows to follow paths Wade's engineers hadn't detected. Harrison, watching his carefully planned operation encounter unexpected problems, ordered his men to increase pump pressure. It was exactly the response they'd anticipated. The additional force simply accelerated the process they'd initiated. "Second phase," Nathan instructed. Rachel's way stations began coordinating the next step of their response. Years of preparation, of understanding how water truly moved through this territory, were about to prove their worth. Wade himself arrived as his operation began experiencing serious difficulties. Through their observation network, they watched him conferring urgently with Harrison, studying reports that made no sense to their technical understanding. "They're pulling investment papers," Thomas reported via messenger. "Just like we expected. The demonstration of technical failure is spooking Wade's financial backers. Judge Monroe's office is already processing the documentation we prepared." The corporate pumps, straining against natural forces they weren't designed to handle, began failing one after another. Harrison's men, focused on maintaining their equipment, didn't notice how their positions had been subtly compromised. "All our channels open," Sarah confirmed. Throughout the valley, water began flowing in ways Wade's operation hadn't predicted. Springs appeared where their maps showed dry ground. Streams changed course, following paths that had been prepared over years of careful land management. "Legal teams are ready," William reported. "The evidence of technical incompetence, combined with proof of corporate overreach, has been filed with 3 territorial offices. Wade's operation isn't just failing, it's creating a legal precedent that will protect the valley for generations." Nathan watched through the transit as their strategy unfolded. Wade had brought force, money, and technical expertise, thinking he could control resources that belonged to the entire territory. Instead, he faced the culmination of decades of preparation, of knowledge passed down through families who understood that some things couldn't be owned, only protected. "Harrison's pulling his men back," Isabella observed. The corporate enforcer had finally realized the extent of his miscalculation. His reputation was built on breaking resistance through superior force and tactical pressure. But he'd never faced opposition that used natural systems as allies. The morning sun climbed higher as Wade's operation disintegrated. Each pump failure, each technical setback, added to the evidence being carefully documented by observers throughout the valley. Judge Monroe's office would use this documentation to establish legal protections that no corporate interest could easily challenge. "Final phase," Nathan signaled. Throughout the territory, their network implemented the last stage of their response. Water flows shifted again, following patterns James had mapped decades ago. Wade's expensive equipment, designed to control resources through mechanical force, proved useless against knowledge passed down through generations. "Wade's investors are withdrawing completely," Thomas reported. "The technical failures, combined with the legal challenges we've filed, convince them this operation is unsustainable. Their lawyers are already preparing documentation to protect themselves from liability." Harrison made one final attempt to salvage the situation, ordering his men to secure key properties through direct force. But Wade, seeing his financial backing evaporate, countermanded the order. Without investor support, he couldn't risk actions that would bring additional legal scrutiny. "Let them go," Nathan instructed as Wade's men began withdrawing. "They've given us everything we needed. Documented proof of corporate attempts to seize water rights, evidence of technical failures, and legal precedents that will help protect other territories facing similar threats." Sarah joined him at the transit, watching as their victory unfolded. "James would be proud," she said softly, "not just of protecting the water, but of how we did it. No violence, no direct confrontation, just a deeper understanding of things corporate power can never fully control." Throughout the valley, families emerged to reclaim their lands, strengthened by the knowledge that they'd faced corporate pressure and prevailed. But this victory went beyond simply defending territory. They demonstrated that resistance didn't always require force. Sometimes it meant working with natural systems, understanding resources in ways that technical expertise couldn't match. "There's more," Emma reported from her telegraph station. "News of what happened here is spreading. Other territories facing similar pressure are asking how we did it. They want to learn about water management, about building networks that can protect resources without relying on force. The legacy they'd built would extend beyond Devil's Fork Valley." James's understanding of water flows, combined with the network they'd developed, created a model others could follow. Wade's operation had failed not just against their resistance, but against knowledge that had been carefully preserved and passed down. "The ghost paths served their final purpose," Nathan observed. "These trails, originally created for outlaws evading corporate power, had evolved into something more valuable. Channels for sharing knowledge about protecting resources that belonged to everyone." As the sun reached its zenith, Nathan watched Wade's men disappear into the distance. The corporate pumps, abandoned as too expensive to recover, stood as monuments to the failure of trying to control through force what needed to be understood with wisdom. The quiet farmer Wade had tried to pressure hadn't just protected his land. He'd helped transform resistance itself, showing that victory sometimes came through patience, understanding, and working with natural systems that corporate power couldn't easily comprehend. The territory would remember this day not for violence or confrontation, but for how water itself had helped defeat those who tried to control it. James's legacy, preserved through generations of careful preparation, had proven that some things couldn't be owned. They could only be protected by people who understood their true nature. As afternoon approached, Nathan began teaching Benjamin how to use the modified transit, passing down knowledge that would help protect the valley for another generation. The ghost paths would remain, not as escape routes, but as reminders that resistance sometimes meant understanding things too subtle for corporate power to control. The transformative victory they'd achieved would ripple outward, helping others face similar pressure with wisdom instead of force. Wade's operation had failed, not just against their network, but against understanding deeper than any technical survey could reveal. The quiet farmer's resistance had evolved into something more powerful than corporate interests could easily defeat. Knowledge passed down through generations, understanding of resources that belonged to everyone, and protection that worked with natural systems instead of trying to control them through force. Up next, you got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.